Hello, welcome to Indus News with me, Usman Noam. Well, we begin this hour with our top story, and that's from Afghanistan, where 24 people have been killed in a suicide explosion near President Ashraf Ghani's election rally. Health officials say 42 others have been wounded in the blast. Local hospital authorities say women and children are among the dead, and most of the victims seem to be civilians. Another blast in the Kabul city centre killed 22 people and wounded 38 others. The Taliban have claimed responsibility for both the attacks. US President Donald Trump says it looks like Iran was behind Saturday's attacks on Saudi oil facilities. But he says military retaliation for the drone strikes is not yet under consideration. Talking to reporters at the White House, Trump said Iran's action would be met with a much bigger response. Trump said he will send Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to Riyadh to discuss an appropriate reaction. Meanwhile, NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg has expressed extreme concern over the potential consequences of the attack. But Iran has dismissed the allegations, saying Saudi Arabia wants war to distract from its internal problems. Saudi Arabia's King Salman says Riyadh is fully capable of dealing with the consequences of the attacks on its oil facilities. In a meeting, the Saudi Council of Ministers reviewed the damage caused by the attacks on Aramco installations. It called upon the international community to confront those responsible for the attacks. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan condemned the attacks on Saudi oil plants. Speaking to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman over the phone, Khan reaffirmed Pakistan's support to Saudi Arabia. Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei says he will never direct talks with the US, but could engage in multilateral discussions if Washington returns to the 2015 nuclear deal. Speaking to students in Tehran, Khamenei said the US policy of maximum pressure on Iran will fail. Khamenei said the US wants to impose its will on the Iranian people. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Abbas Aslani, who's a political analyst based in Tehran. Mr. Aslani, thank you for joining us here on Indus News. So tell us, President Donald Trump has blamed Iran for the drone attacks on the Saudi Arabian oil facilities, but he ruled out a war on Tehran. Do you see a shift in the US foreign policy towards Iran?
Well, Americans, they have tried to use every opportunity or incident in order to create a coalition against Iran because they have failed to do so in the past opportunities. They wanted to gain the support from different countries in order to create a kind of group or coalition to secure the region for the vessels and the ships movements in the waterway of the Hormuz. But they failed to do so, and now they are using this incident as a potential to contribute to that process. When it comes to the retaliation against Iran, we have been some remarks or even tweets by the American president, which has been somehow heated and very tough. But when it comes to the practical steps, Americans, they might be thinking of a quick, short, and surgical attacks on Iran. But Tehran has made quite sure that if there is a military attack against the country, it will retaliate strongly. So this makes Americans to hesitate to start a war with the country, because American President Donald Trump is ahead of the presidential election in the country and he wants re-election. That's why I think they will not be after a military conflict with the country.
Abbas, we've got Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, as he's also ruled out talks with the US at any level. I mean, he really speaks out. Do you think this decision is in the favor of the people of Iran?
Well, I would say that this is not something new. And Iran, I think, is going the right path and is no other option but to do so. Because that is not Iran who left the negotiating table. Iranians are yet at the nuclear deal and they are at the negotiating table. They talk to the remaining members of the nuclear deal, and the issue is that the Americans themselves left the negotiating table and the nuclear deal, which was a framework for the talks and dialogue. And if they want to resume those kind of dialogue and talks with Iran, I think they need to return to that negotiating table. And this is not something strange and not new. Iran has had this position since as of the past so far. So I think if Iran ignores this nuclear deal and engages in new talks, I think that will be undermining the process which took 4 years to achieve. And moving in that direction and framework, I think will best secure the interests of all parties to the deal. And this can be the only logical way to go forth.
Abbas Aslani, thank you for your time and joining us here on Indus News. Now, Russia detains 2 North Korean vessels in the Sea of Japan after one of them attacked a Russian patrol ship. The Russian Security Service says 3 military personnel were injured in the attack. The Foreign Ministry says it will summon the acting North Korean ambassador in Moscow to protest the incident. And staying with Russia, and they've offered advanced weaponry to Saudi Arabia following Saturday's attacks on its oil installations. President Vladimir Putin says it's up to Riyadh to make what he called the wise decision to buy leading Russian air defense systems. At a press conference in Ankara, Putin pointed to the purchase of the Russian systems by Iran and Turkey as evidence of their effectiveness. He said the attacks on Saudi Arabia were not discussed during his talks on Syria with the presidents of Turkey and Iran. Putin said the Yemen conflict should be resolved through negotiations between all sides. Now, Bahrain has signed an agreement with the United States to purchase its Patriot missile system. Crown Prince Salman bin Hamad Al Khalifa made the announcement during a meeting with President Donald Trump at the White House. The Crown Prince says Bahrain wants to strengthen its trade ties with the US. The Patriot system is a long-range missile defense aimed at countering tactical ballistic missiles. Well, US President Donald Trump says he will soon meet the prime ministers of both Pakistan and India to discuss tensions over Kashmir. Talking to the media in Washington, Mr. Trump said progress has been made to reduce tensions between the 2 countries. Trump's schedule suggests he will meet Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan later this month at the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Last week, the US President repeated his offer to mediate the Kashmir dispute between Pakistan and India. Relations between the South Asian neighbours have been tense since India illegally annexed occupied Kashmir on the 5th of August. Now, Islamabad says the Kartarpur corridor for Indian Sikh pilgrims will open on November 9th. Pilgrims will be able to use the opening to attend celebrations marking the 550th anniversary of Guru Nanak, the religion's founder. Project Director Atif Majid says 76 immigration counters have been set up to issue visit visas to 5,000 Sikh pilgrims per day.
We have achieved 90% of the achieved target, our desired target, and because we have to complete phase 1 by 9th November, when we're going to have another inauguration, inshallah, before the Babaji's celebration, the 550th celebration.
Amnesty International has vowed to defy the Indian government's attempt to silence its criticism of human rights violations in occupied Kashmir. New Delhi has recently accused Amnesty India of violating foreign exchange regulations by receiving funds from its London-based parent organisation. Amnesty International Secretary General Kumi Naidu says the Modi administration has worked hard to stifle Amnesty's work in India. Criticising the blackout in the valley, Naidu said it was a horrific act by the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he would annex the land if re-elected. The Jordan Valley is part of the occupied West Bank that Israel captured in the 1967 war. Meanwhile, the German Chancellor also called for a return to the 2015 nuclear deal to defuse tensions in the Middle East. She said curbing Iran's nuclear activities is essential for peace in the region. Now, Israelis are voting today to elect a new government. Snap elections were called after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu failed to cobble together a coalition after polls in April. Locked in a tight race against Benny Gantz and with corruption charges hanging over him, Netanyahu is fighting for political survival. In a last-ditch bid to attract far-right votes, Netanyahu has pledged to annex most of the Palestinian West Bank if re-elected. The pledge has been met with outrage from most Muslims. Former military chief Gantz had no previous political experience before declaring his candidacy in December. About 6.4 million Israeli voters are eligible to cast ballots for 120 seats in the Knesset. 31 parties are contesting today's elections. Well, we'll be back with more news from around the world after this short break. Hello and welcome back. Now, Britain's Supreme Court begins hearing petitions today against Prime Minister Boris Johnson's controversial suspension of Parliament. In today's hearing, lawyers for the petitioners accused PM Johnson of silencing MPs to avoid scrutiny over his Brexit plans. But a government lawyer said the Prime Minister has the right to suspend Parliament and it's not a matter for the courts. The court's 11-member bench will have the final say on the legality of the suspension. A ruling is expected by Thursday, but may be delivered on Friday or early next week. Italy's far-right league has promised to unleash a battery of referendums to sink reforms planned by the new government. Disgruntled former Deputy Prime Minister Matteo Salvini has denounced former coalition allies as traitors. Addressing thousands of people, Salvini promised to force referendums to undo planned legislation, including a change in the electoral law. Dubbing Prime Minister Conte a traitor, Salvini said he is acting against national interest to please France and Germany. Speaking in the small northern town of Pontida, the League leader suggested he has fallen foul of an EU plot. Referendums have to be held in Italy if at least 500,000 voters petition for one. The EU has started formal proceedings against Hungary for alleged breaches of the bloc's values under the rule of law. Budapest is accused of imposing restrictions on media, judges, academics, minorities and rights groups. European ministers have met in Brussels for the first formal hearing on Hungary. The hearing is looking into the country for violating the rule of law, known as an Article 7 investigation. The inquiry could lead to the suspension of Budapest's EU voting rights if other bloc members agree. But Hungary has strongly rejected the accusations, calling them politically motivated. The European Parliament kick-started proceedings against the Central European country a year ago. And staying with the European Parliament, and they've endorsed the nomination of Christine Lagarde as the next president of the European Central Bank. She won backing from 394 lawmakers, with 206 voting against and 49 abstaining in a secret ballot. Lagarde will be the first woman to hold the post. EU leaders will formalise her appointment at a summit in mid-October for an 8-year term. She was nominated by European governments to succeed Mario Draghi from the 1st of November as the head of the central bank. Now, France has announced a $66 million aid package for Sudan. Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian also offered to help the country tackle its foreign debt. Le Drian held a press conference alongside his Sudanese counterpart Asma Abdullah in Khartoum. He said the bilateral talks focused on fixing the Sudanese economic crisis. He also said France will lobby for Sudan to be removed from the US list of countries it considers state sponsors of terrorism. The listing prevents Sudan from receiving much-needed financial aid from international donors. 15 villagers have been killed after a truck fell off a cliff in southern Philippines. Police say 11 others are in critical condition. The police officials said the vehicle was traveling downhill in South Cotabato province when its brakes failed. They said the vehicle was carrying about 30 passengers home from a beach trip at the time of the accident. Rescue officials said young children are among the victims. Now, in other news, a 26-year-old Nigerian woman, Gloria, dreamed of a better life. She left for Europe with 4 other women. Only 2 of the friends survived the tortuous journey to Libya before becoming stranded there. More in this report.
Gloria once dreamed of an international career in fashion, but since her return from Libya to Benin City in Nigeria, she has been working as a seamstress on an assembly line in a tracksuit workshop, earning just $40 a month. Like many Nigerians who try to escape poverty, Gloria's journey to Europe was cut short in Libya.
That just had the belief that if I travel out, I'll be able to help the family. So when I came back, it's only him I told that look at what I went through. Outside, they asked me, I tell them, it's normal.
Like Gloria, 14,000 young Nigerians stuck in Libya have returned home since 2017, thanks to a United Nations programme. The state of Edo provides them with about €100 to get back on their feet. The state has also created training programmes to encourage reintegration.
It's a priority for us to give returnees and young people that could be potentially migrating jobs and opportunities that they are interested in, things that they would like to do, and not just things they would like to do. We don't want them just engaged. We want them to be able to see potential for growth.
In Nigeria, more than half of under-35s are unemployed. More than 60,000 Nigerians are still stranded in Libya. The vast majority are still in detention centres or in the hands of traffickers and local militias.
In Thailand, environmentalist Railin Satadasanaran, also known as Lily, has taken up the challenge to clean up her country. Little Lily started her anti-plastic campaign at the age of 8. Bangkok's young activist wants Thailand free of single-use plastic by 2020. More in this report.
This area of Bangkok is known as the city's green lung, but it's suffocating under plastic, like much of the country. Lily is just 12, yet she's leading the fight to clean up the city, inspired by young Swedish climate change superstar Greta Thunberg.
Greta is really important to me because what she symbolizes, she says that kids can make a difference. She wants everybody to do something, and she got so many people together.
Thailand's the world's 6th biggest polluter of the oceans. Every Thai person uses on average 8 plastic bags a day. Lily is taking her message to the top. She has led several sit-ins outside the government house, met with business leaders, and she spoke at this UN conference.
It is hard, but I like to be positive about it because there's always hope. We can always fix something. If there's a problem, we fix it.
Lily's goal is to ban single-use plastic bags by 2022. Her first victory, managing to convince a supermarket chain in Bangkok not to offer plastic bags 1 day a week.
Now, from one teenage climate activist to another, Greta Thunberg has received Amnesty International's Ambassador of the Conscious Award for 2019. The award celebrates individuals and groups working to protect human rights. The 16-year-old Swede with Asperger's syndrome runs a movement called Fridays for Future. To spread climate change awareness, she's been skipping school every Friday to protest outside the Swedish Parliament, demanding action to tackle the climate crisis. The movement has now spread via social media to young people in other countries.
I think there is an awakening going on. Even though it is slow, the pace is picking up and the debate is shifting.
Well, I'll be back with the news from the world of business and sports after this short break. Hello and welcome back. Now in business news, international oil prices declined after a market panic about Saudi oil supplies that sent them surging 14% yesterday. The global benchmark Brent futures are trading about 0.5% lower, while US crude is down nearly 1%. European stock markets are flat as investors maintain funds in safe havens. London, Frankfurt and Paris are practically unchanged ahead of a meeting of US Federal Reserve policymakers. Earlier, the Shanghai Composite closed nearly 2% down on fears of a conflict between the US and Iran. The Hang Seng Index was also 1.5% lower after Hong Kong's economic outlook was downgraded by Moody's. The Nikkei 225 in Tokyo was flat following a US announcement that it has agreed a trade deal with Japan. The United States has reached an initial trade agreement with Japan on tariff barriers and digital trade. President Trump says the agreement can be implemented without congressional approval. In a letter to Congress, President Trump informed lawmakers the deal will be made under trade law provisions. This allows the US president to make reciprocal tariff reductions. Last year, the Trump administration notified Congress it would pursue negotiations with Japan under the new method. Trump says he will be entering into an executive agreement with Japan regarding digital trade. His letter did not disclose any contents of the agreements. A strike by 50,000 General Motors workers has brought factories and warehouses to a grinding halt. Staff from over 40 plants walked out when talks between the company and the United Auto Workers Union hit an impasse. Investors fear General Motors' credit rating could drop to junk bond status if the strike lasts more than a week. The strike was called when the union and management failed to reach an agreement over pay and conditions. One of the biggest sticking points is GM's decision to close 4 car assembly plants in the country. This is the largest industrial action to hit the car maker in more than a decade. Now, as the war in Syria goes on, the country's economy can no longer sustain its people. Shops that once bustled with activity are now wrecked reminders of happier days in the past. More in this report.
The civil war has battered Syria's finances and depleted its foreign reserves. A flurry of international sanctions imposed on President Bashar al-Assad's regime and associated businessmen at the start of the war has compounded the situation. Syrian media puts this down to a high demand for dollars in neighboring Lebanon, whose banking system is used by Syrian importers for their own transactions.
The increase in the value of the dollar makes the Syrian pound increase 20, 30, or 40 Syrian pounds per day. Prices change every hour. So the customer who came yesterday and bought at such price can come back today and will buy the same thing for more.
Shop owners say business has slowed since the value of the Syrian pound plunged to its lowest level this month. The black market value of the Syrian pound on 8th of September stood at 691 against the dollar. The following day, it climbed to 610. When the 8-year civil war began, the rate stood at around 48 pounds to the dollar.
The variation of the exchange rate means that when I want to buy 50 kg of this or that product, I lose 10 kg and I am only able to buy 40 kg for the same price. There is no stability, so we have to wait a bit for it to buy. But if you wait, your store slowly becomes empty.
In the Kurdish majority city of Qamishli in northeast Syria, the situation is just as grim. Last week, the government agreed to take legal measures against foreign currency dealers who manipulate exchange rates. But no one knows for sure when the situation will improve for ordinary people.
Well, it's 31 degrees here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that's all from me and the team here in Lahore, but I'll be back at the top of the hour with the headlines. Bye-bye.